Breton, who's our Cloud Platform Business Manager. So this session will be recorded and everybody will be on mute throughout the call. At the end of the call, we will have a opportunity to ask questions, so everybody will be unmuted. But if you do have any questions throughout, please just pop them in the IM window in the bottom left-hand corner. So I'll start off with the agenda. So the agenda for today's call, I'll start off by giving a bit of an overview about Visual for those of you who aren't aware of who we are and what we do, and a quick summary of the modern desktop. I'll pass over to Ian and he'll cover Windows 10 features, deploying Windows 10, the security elements, as well as the interface. And just to let you know, the recording has now started. Wonderful. So for those of you who aren't aware of Visual and what we do, so Visual, we are a Microsoft-only partner, so we only deploy Microsoft technologies, and we do deploy across the whole of the Microsoft stack. So one of the things we focus on as an organisation is to help customers to leverage the most out of their Microsoft technology. So we understand that you make a large investment through your enterprise agreements, and if that technology is not consumed as well as deployed, then it's a waste of money to you and your organisation. So in terms of where we sit, we are a Microsoft UK partner, Gold partner, but we also in 2015 were Microsoft UK Partner of the Year, finalist in 2012 and 13, but we've also won a number of other awards that have been given to us by Microsoft. So the way that our business is set up, it's made up of three main areas. So we've got the consulting part of the business. This is split into business and technology. So the business part of our organisation is made up of architects, engagement managers and business analysts. So the way that these guys work is they help with transformational and strategic engagements. So if you're looking to move to the cloud, want to implement a flexible mobile strategy, they can come in and help you to write that strategy, look at the technology that you've currently got within your enterprise agreement or what you're looking to adopt, and help you with a roadmap to help you to consume that technology, but also make sure that it's deployed and consumed in a logical nature. Also, as part of these engagements, they can help with user adoption. So really focusing on the strategy and bringing all the technology to life. We then move on to the technology part of the consulting side. So this is where one of Ian Stretton's team sit. So Ian looks after the cloud platform side of the business. So the way that our technology side is set up is that we've got different business groups that focus on different technologies, but we focus across the whole of the Microsoft stack. So each of the different departments focuses specifically on one set of technologies. So within Cloud Platform would be the Windows 10 team. So these are made up of subject matter experts. So the consultants that we send to site only focus on one specific technology. We then move on to the services part of the business. So we have a managed services team that focus on helping you to adopt, but also consume the technology that you've implemented. So obviously with the move towards cloud technologies, people are finding, customers specifically are finding that it's hard now to make sure that they've got the skills in-house to support the new technology. So we can help with different flavours of support, whether that's proactive, reactive, or a fully managed service. We have the capabilities in-house. All of our staff are trained to MSc level and can help on a 9 to 5, 24/7 nature. We also have the solutions part of the business. So we've got an application development house on site. They help to create business line applications to help consume Microsoft technologies, mainly focusing on Office 365. But the main reason for this is to help streamline business processes. Some of the ones that we've got created are based around Minerva, so room bookings, case management, but we've also got business specific. So depending upon the different verticals, we've got ones that help to consume technologies, but also help those verticals as well. For example, safeguarding children. So the way, what we found is we help obviously with tactical projects, so for example Windows 10, SharePoint, Exchange, Skype for Business, but we've also seen that there's been a shift in focus in the market and a lot more customers are looking to have transformational projects. So what we actually set up has been 3 transformational propositions that help to engage, empower, and enhance. And these are focused around connected business, end user computing, and optimized service vision. So the connected business, this is to help present the right information to the right person at the right time on the right device. So focusing around CRM, Azure, making sure that all the applications that you have are given to the right users so they can make the right decision at the right time. Empowering, so this is end user computing. This focuses mainly around implementing a flexible mobile working strategy. So making sure that your users can be more productive and they've got the right platform. So this would focus on elements of Office 365 and that stack, as well as Windows 10. And then moving on to enhance. So this is the optimized service vision. So this is where customers are looking to either move to the cloud, and that can be a mixture of moving things all to the cloud, but we understand that customers have got a need to keep some things on premise as well. So we could talk through the hybrid options. So really we've helped a lot of customers, one being Derby City Council, to move their data centre or the right parts to them to the cloud to help save costs. So I'll start now to talk about the modern desktop. So the desktop today is very different than it was yesterday, and Microsoft have acknowledged that desktop is now influenced by the experience that people have both at home and at work. So the modern desktop now focuses very heavily around the ability to be productive, user experience, but with security being at the top of the agenda. So with security threats changing all the time and the increase in cyber attacks, Microsoft now focus solely on providing the most secure platform through Windows 10. And just quickly moving on to the convergence of the desktop. So there's obviously lots of different streams that people get involved in through Microsoft technologies, whether that's the Xbox environment, through your desktop on Windows 8, but also through the Windows Phone. So lots of customers were feeding back to Microsoft that they wanted a single working experience, whether that's at home or at work, because obviously things have changed now and customers are working a lot more at home to give increased flexibility. So Windows 10 is the first platform that now ensures that you get the same experience brought into one. So I'll now pass over to Ian Stratton, who's going to talk to you around the Windows 10 features.
Good morning, all. Hopefully you can all hear me fine. So thank you for that, Abby, and for that introduction. So just going to go through some sort of high level features of Windows 10, and then some of the different security aspects that they're building in, and then potentially some of the deployment and management options. And then what we'll look to do is open that out to the floor to sort of ask some questions, which we'll potentially have to take away and come back to you with some answers on. So kind of feel free to gather those questions as we go through some of these slides. So just coming into some of the new features that are out there. So the first one, if you like, that I'm kind of using personally is Windows Hello for Business. So this brings an alternative to the kind of standard username and passwords, and gives the options around biometric kind of logons into your platforms these days, using obviously the Windows 10, using the hardware that Windows 10 will run on top of. So that can be things like a fingerprint reader built into the hardware, or the most common one that we're finding that works really well these days is the camera. So if you've got a camera on the top of your PC, that's does facial recognition and then can log you in using obviously your face there to basically log into those services. Obviously, what we can do there is not just logging you into services, but potentially into applications, and that can go down even further levels as well. So that's a really nice feature that actually, for modern corporate desktops, these days, where it's not necessarily just somebody sitting in front of a PC, but people out on the road using desktops, using tablets, using mobile phones. That's a really good way for logging into the platforms these days. Obviously, most people will be aware of Edge as the taking over from from Internet Explorer. So there's lots of feature-rich functionality with Edge. I'm getting distracted by the questions that are already coming in, so that's good. If we can kind of come back to those at the end, though. But so those Windows Edge features allow for, again, a more feature-rich experience. So with the ability to draw on sort of web pages, if there's something out there that you think is interesting, or if they're internal web pages, maybe a piece of information that needs to be captured and then sent on to a colleague for them to go and get some more information on, for example, all of that can be captured, snipped up, and then sent out either on an email or shared with somebody via a OneNote, for example, just making the whole experience easier for the end users to kind of share and collaborate on that information through Edge. Building on some of the health, and I'll talk on this a little bit in a second, around the device security, is the device health and conditional access. So this is allowing the ability to basically have the health of the operating system is protected through different mechanisms. So I'll touch on that in a second. So we've got Windows Defender as well in there, which is advanced threat protection. So again, that's building on top of the Edge services. Sorry, 2 seconds. I'm just gonna. Can I just? Apologies for this. I'm just going to pause the webcast for a second. I've got somebody that hopefully can join me and help go through some of these features. Just bear with me 2 seconds.
Just whilst Ian is just consulting with one of his colleagues, thank you very much both Gavin and Max for your questions. What we'll do is we'll get these answered at the end of the call.
Chris, are you there with me?
I am, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So actually, I've got one of my colleagues with me, one of the guys who go out in the field and deploy some of this technology, who's hopefully going to help me explain some of this in a lot better detail than I think I was. So Chris, what I was just talking about there is we're on the device health attestation. I can't even say. Yeah, thank you. And conditional access. Could you just give us a bit on that one?
I can, yes. So. The device health attestation is it works on technology based on Hyper-V, and what it does, it logs at boot time details of the device whilst it's booting, and that then information is then or can be passed on to a device health attestation service, which works in conjunction with the conditional access, which, providing the information passed on to the service, checks out that the device is healthy. It will then pass the device through the conditional access and obviously give access to whatever's been set up. So it could be Office 365, but essentially it's information that gets passed to the service on the health of the device from a hardware point of view. So if the device has been booted from its for instance, Windows 10 secure boot environment, then it would essentially pass. If it had been booted from, say, a Linux USB key or something like that, then it would count as a fail. Or if the hard drive had been removed and something else had been put in to the system, it would fail.
So it's essentially it's providing additional kind of lockdown services and additional reporting services as well into the administrators. So is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then so moving on to Windows Defender, I think we've got a slide to say about the security coming up. So in a bit more detail.
There were several things in here. Windows Defender is obviously the newer version of what used to be the forefront protection in Windows. It's a built-in feature. So I've actually picked out some pieces on this slide that were probably things that people might be more interested in, which are newer sort of Windows 10 features. So the things that I'd probably talk about here are the device guard and the credential guard. So device and credential guard again use this sort of UEFI and Hyper-V technology to provide separation to, for instance, credential guard. Your credentials would be separated from being available within the operating system. So once Windows is loaded, your credentials are separated and not available to things like pass the hash attacks. And that's essentially how Device Guard works as well. It provides a way to lock down trusted apps from malware. And according to research, 90% of malware comes through unsigned applications. So Device Guard gives you that functionality to set up trusted applications and signed applications, so the machine would only run those run those applications, which gives you that, again, that separation and providing you an extra level of security.
So on the Device Guard, it's kind of running Hyper-V code, isn't it, essentially, under the hood? So it's kind of running the.
It's using Hyper-V technology. Essentially.
To provide that sort of separation mechanism between the underlying hardware and then the operating system on the top.
That's right. Yeah. So the things like the device health attestation and the credential guard and the device guard, although you can use them separately, they all sort of use the same technology and offer that same sort of separation. So the device guard is for your signed applications, your credential guard is your sort of separation of passwords, and your health attestation is what gets passed on to a service, which can be used, from Configuration Manager or even cloud services that provide health attestation services.
So building that in, and I think there's obviously some other bits on this particular slide on security. So just can you give us a bit of a scenario, Chris, as to where you could see that being used? So I'm thinking if you've got somebody's either bring your own device or a corporately owned device, for example, how would these tools help the organisations to lock down access into their environment using some of these tools? Because there's different mechanisms, I suppose. Now we've got more features that we have at our disposal to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to start with, everybody's going to be running some sort of antivirus, and then obviously using additional security features like BitLocker to encrypt a device. So if your device is stolen, the data is secure, and then in conjunction with MBAM. MBAM's stands for Microsoft BitLocker and Administration Monitoring, which it gives you a front end to BitLocker recovery, so for your service desk staff and a self-service for your users as well. If they forget their PIN at startup, BitLocker can be the BitLocker key can easily be recovered from by your users from a self-service or a quick call to the help desk. They give a reoccurring key which is different every time they log a call. For instance, they give that to the help desk put that code into a console, and then they get back a 25-digit key that they have to put in. That then unlocks the system, which they could then get in and change their PIN. So when you combine these services, the Windows Defender, the BitLocker, and then going on to the device and the credential guard, they're just sort of securing down, in a much sort of deeper way, the system. So even if you use Device Guard, for instance, in a very simple, unconfigured environment, it provides you with a greater, a really, really great degree of security. So because you're allowing your signed applications, you can, for instance, create a rule that says only allow signed applications to run. That in itself gives you, a really, really hot sort of hardened environment.
Okay. So
there are a few other things on there, App Blocker and Windows Information Protection as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you want to just kind of touch on those? So obviously what we've kind of covered a little bit there is the ability you've got hardware, and we can kind of lock down to specific hardware sets. Obviously, there's the TPM chip as well that we can utilize in terms of doing the BitLocker encryption. So that's going to provide lockdown features, and
so that covers your lockdown sort of from startup, really. Things like your BitLocker and your device guard and your credential guard. So once you get into Windows 10 itself, then you can sort of move on and start using these other tools. So one of them, App Locker, is a really useful way of controlling the applications, sort of like a blacklist, whitelist level of control over applications that you run. So even if, for instance, if you didn't use the device guard for your allowing only signed applications, you could then further use App Locker to sort of specify what applications you're allowed to run or not run, which for some organisations, particularly sort of ones that handle sensitive data, is a really good way of keeping a very tight control.
Cool. And then just a final one on this particular page is the Windows Information Protection.
Yeah, so Windows Information Protection gives you the functionality to identify personal and business information and determine which applications have access to that information. So
almost putting an application in a little bubble itself.
It's not exactly a bubble, but it's just assigning. It's identifying that data, and I suppose you could describe it as a bubble, but it identifies the whether it's personal or business, and then determines which applications are allowed access. So you can prevent copy and pasting from business data. It's also designed specifically to work with Office 365, so and Azure Rights Management. So with those both those tools running, it gives you that extra depth of secure control.
So it's obviously designed for those services, but can that be used into, well, I guess there's a list of supported applications that will work with, isn't there? Or it's not just it can't.
I don't think it's not a list of supported applications. No, it's more about identifying information, within documents. So it's not about the applications themselves. It's more about the data within those and what apps are allowed to have access to that data.
Okay, cool, good stuff. Next slide that we'll go through then is more focused on the deployment of Windows 10. So this is
sure.
If you want to go through some of the options that we now have, obviously building on some of the stuff that used to happen in Windows 7, Windows 8, even going back to Windows XP. But I think there's a few more features now that you can use to deploy this Windows 10.
Yeah. So obviously you can use traditional methods deploying Windows 10. You've got applications like the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which gives you sort of a very basic out-of-the-box tool to deploy an operating system with some applications. Or if you have a slightly larger organisation where you might be using tools like Configuration Manager, you can tie those two applications together, which give you a very sort of granular level of build control in what you call a task sequence. So, and with Windows 10, there are many other options which you can use within those task sequences now, and they're a lot simpler than they used to be. And with the updates in the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, become lots of changes and lots of improvements in the way those task sequences run, to give you that built-in task sequence level of security. Things like BitLocker, you can now have BitLocker pre-provisioned, and you can kick off the encryption during the task sequence, which prevents you having to wait a long time, which typically, with going back to sort of the days of Windows 7, didn't have that functionality within the task sequence. So the task sequences would end up being paused while encryption happened, or it didn't happen during the task sequence, which would then mean it would need to be set off once the user had received the machine. But all that can happen now within the task sequence. So along with the deploying your business applications and your antivirus, you can encrypt, for instance, like the used space on the disk, which makes the encryption a lot faster as well. And if you integrate that with something like MBAM as well, it will encrypt the disk, and then when the build is finished and restart the machine, as soon as the user logs on, it would prompt the user to set a PIN if that is something that you'd set in your group policies, and it's a real nag. It wouldn't go away until the user has set the PIN, so it'll overlay over the top of all the other windows, and then when it had received that PIN information, it would forward it on for storage on the MBAM database. So there are obviously, to get to that point, it's not quite as simple as just sort of like pulling Windows 10 out of the box. So some of the typical processes that we go through are creating a core image, which typically would contain up-to-date patches. There are several different methods that organizations go for. You can have sort of a thin image, which is generally just the Windows and the patches, or you can have hybrid images. Some people like to put in sort of typical redistributables like .NET Framework and some of the C++ redistributables as well. And then obviously you can have your sort of full images, which contain all of your business applications, which sort of running down that list from 1 to 3, the more applications you put into a task sequence or into an image, the less flexible that image becomes, especially during times when you need to make up changes to applications. So
Chris, sorry mate, go on.
No, I was just going to say, my general recommendation is to go with a thin image and have your applications packaged and run during a task sequence. And a lot of people seem to sort of have this notion that having applications in the image makes deployment a lot faster, but I think it's a bit of a you have to weigh off a larger image, larger Windows image containing applications as to a slightly longer task sequence where you have the applications installing, but it gives you that much more flexible environment. If you have to change one of those applications, it's very easy to sort of slot it in and slot it out. I use the analogy of it being a bit like a cake, so where you layer on, so you start with your operating system and then your applications go on top in layers, so it makes it very easy to sort of take a piece out and put another piece in, which generally sort of does happen during the sort of build process, because a lot of customers already using Config Manager would have a multitude of applications which they may have been deploying with their old operating system, Windows 7 or Windows 8.1, and they would be generally sort of used for a Windows deployment. And then they may find that, okay, so there are newer versions of these applications, so it's easy to sort of just package the next version and take the old one out and put the new one in, and that's generally how builds evolve over time, and having that layered approach gives you that flexibility.
But again, going back to that, I suppose, like you say, in terms of keeping those images up to date, having a thinner image that's quick and easy to deploy means that we can be a lot quicker, a lot more agile in getting those Windows 10 sort of deployments. Because Windows 10, it's being presented as probably one of the last operating systems that Microsoft will produce. We all know in reality what that means is that there'll just be continuous patches, continuous updates to that. So, we're going to need to have mechanisms that we can quickly roll those features, those new security patches out to the desktops. And I guess that like I say, that feeds into what we're recommending here: thin image, small image to get it rolled out in the initial thing, and then layer on the application deployments over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously with the servicing and what have you, we'll probably sort of cover on the next slide, but I just wanted to quickly cover some of the other methods that you are able to upgrade or reconfigure Windows 10. So obviously there's an option for an in-place upgrade, which gives you the facility to sort of go from one operating system to Windows 10. But I've never been a big fan of that method, but it is one that's available. At this point in time, it's not particularly flexible. It doesn't allow you to sort of use a custom image, or you have to use the Windows 10 as it is supplied by Microsoft for that to work. So it's there, but it's not an option which any customers that I've worked with certainly have opted for. They tend to sort of prefer that. Right, let's go for a clean slate, whether it's on old hardware or new hardware, clean the machine down and get the new operating system, new versions of the applications on, and start from fresh. There's also now with the new ADK, which is the administration and deployment kit, which is a component that you need when deploying operating systems. There's a tool called the ICD, which is the Imaging Configuration Designer, which allows you to customize your builds as well. So with many customers, what we generally try to recommend is to keep your initial build as a sort of a one-fits-all. But for some customers where that just doesn't work, you can create what they call a user-driven build, which gives you menu options to start the build off. So tools like the ADK have these additional tools built in. So there's also another tool which allows you to create what they call provisioning packs, which essentially it's like a mini build essentially. So if you take a version of Windows, like a retail version, for instance, you can create a provisioning pack, and you can deploy that over the top of a retail build of Windows 10. It does have limitations, but it's an option for some people, which may be required. But it can do things like install applications. It can even change the version of Windows 10. So, for instance, if you bought a device with a Windows 10 Home version or something like that, it will allow you to update that to a Windows 10 Enterprise, which is again not something which I've had any customers asking about, but it's just Microsoft giving you options for deployment.
Okay.
So,
should we move on to how we manage then? So that's all your deployment and how we would get it out there. So in terms of management, obviously we would recommend Configuration Manager, and then there's some other features on here as well about how you can manage it once it's deployed, and how we can get all of these features that we talked about in the security aspect, all of the logs that creates, all of that information that creates on the end user's devices, how that all reports back. So obviously that comes through to here. So do you want to go through what we can do and how we can report on some of that here?
So as we can see on the slide there, we've got the System Center Configuration Manager as a recommended sort of management tool. There's also Microsoft Intune as a management tool. So I'll start with Configuration Manager. So we've talked about Configuration Manager being a tool for choice for deploying those devices, but beyond that, once you've completed like transformation or a rollout of devices, those devices will then be managed by Configuration Manager. So it will allow you to do things like software deployment, software updates, reporting, and lots. That's just sort of like the start of the Configuration Manager. But essentially, it's a management tool which will take that device from when it's built through to, with new features like the Windows 10 servicing, potentially take you through to the next operating system and beyond. So Configuration Manager uses functionality of WSUS, so the Windows Update Server, and it uses the tools for the antivirus as well, so the System Center Endpoint Protection, and it will talk to Microsoft and download the definitions for these updates, and through a mechanism called an ADR, which is an automatic deployment rule, you set all your preferences, and then on a schedule that you've decided, it will download the patches for antivirus definitions and critical and security updates, and it will push them out. So it's not just laptops and desktops that can be managed. It's you can manage the servers as well. You can manage thin clients running Windows embedded. So it gives you a really high level of control over and above the typical WSUS environment, although it uses that WSUS engine to do it. So with the advent of Windows 10, there are now further options that are deployed in a similar sort of way. So the Windows 10 servicing now gives you, as Ian mentioned, this ability to push out your next version of Windows. So Microsoft have these what they call deployment rings, and they align to the current branch and current branch for business versions of Windows. So when Microsoft release their 6 monthly updates to Windows 10, which give you your feature additions, you can create a rule, and you can automatically download that update and package it up and push that out to your devices, which is potentially quite a scary concept, but it doesn't have to go to your production users straight away. You can set up different collections of machines, some that might be test machines, some might be pilot machines, and you can also run up to 6 months behind the Microsoft client or current branch for business cycle as well. So that gives you the opportunity to let things settle down after they've been released. So if you're not comfortable with that, deploying new features for essentially an entire operating system, you can wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, deploy onto test machines, and then wait another period of time, and then push out to your wider community. And then it's not such a painful experience when as going from, say, Windows 7 to Windows 8, which is for a lot of companies, an entire transformation project going from one operating system to another. So what Microsoft are doing is giving you that ability to try and keep up to date on a more regular basis and take away the cost of keeping up to date and compliant. So that's covering the configuration manager side of things, and then I mentioned Microsoft Intune as well. So Microsoft Intune is a cloud-based service offered by Microsoft, which can run as a standalone solution, but it can also run as an integrated solution with Config Manager. So if your business has made an investment in Config Manager, it's quite a good idea to run Microsoft Intune as an integrated service. And having Intune gives you additional functionality for support of devices. So going beyond your laptops and desktops, it now gives you the option to manage devices like Android phones, Apple phones and iPads, and you can also manage your laptops and desktops through Intune as well. So the benefit that gives you over and above managing your devices through Config Manager, particularly with companies that are going ahead and using Office 365 now, it gives you tools like conditional access. So you create compliance baselines for your devices, and then you grant conditional access to services within Office 365. So if it gives you that flexibility to allow users to access data from bring your own device, or a laptop at home, computer at home, and so that's where Intune gives you that additional functionality, which is essentially sort of passing on to the users that flexibility in where they do their job. It's a very powerful tool, and configured correctly will give users a high level of experience, the same as what they would receive from a desktop or a corporate machine. I'm just going to have. We probably should move on to the next slide now.
Okay. So this kind of feeds into probably a question that I think Max has actually asked us, which is in terms of preparing for Windows 10. Max's question was, does SCCM need to be upgraded in particular? So I think the final slide that we have for today is kind of how do organisations excuse me, prepare for rolling out Windows 10.
Yeah, so one of the model that Microsoft are going for now with this sort of like rolling service cycle for operating systems is reflected in Configuration Manager as well. So in the past, config manager, like upgrading operating system was quite a big process. But after 15.11 version of configuration manager, you now receive 6 monthly updates which will appear in the config manager console. So if you decide that you want to deploy Windows 10, the anniversary edition, then you need to have configuration manager running the same sort of equivalent version as well. So in preparation for that, you also need to sort of upgrade some of the components as well. So the ADK that I mentioned earlier, that's a tool which every time a new version of Windows released, the ADK gets updated to provide that extra deployment functionality. So the answer to the question is yes, config manager does need to be upgraded to provide the deployment functionality for Windows 10, and also for that Intune functionality as well. It's better to sort of keep config manager up to date, and that's why Microsoft are giving customers that benefit by having the in-console updates visible. So it takes away the sort of the headache. Really, it's not always a faultless process, and there are times when it's not going to necessarily be as simple to do that update. When the in-console update appears, it runs through a series of checks, and it might check things like the prerequisite components. So if you've upgraded config manager from a long way back, it may well be that your SQL database is no longer the right level, or even the operating system may not be the right level. But from config manager 16.02, Microsoft gave the option to update the operating system in place, which wasn't possible before that. So for instance, quite a few customers that I've been to recently are running config manager on server 2008 R2. So there's a sort of a process that we go through now to get them up to that 16.02 version of config manager, and then it will allow you to run an in-place upgrade for the server operating system. And then you can go ahead and get right up to the 16.10 version of config manager. So it's the preparation part of it is there are steps involved, but we've done it many times and very successfully as well. So it's something which we can do with ease. There's a few other items on there that relate to the sort of preparation of Windows 10. So group policy, it's typically an area which many customers struggle with. Group policies can get quite overcomplicated, and they tend to sort of just grow exponentially over time. So again, it's something which Microsoft provide a set of baseline policies for. So it's always a good opportunity to take existing policies and have a review and then scale them back a little bit. We spoke briefly earlier about Windows Update Services and how that integrates with Config Manager to do the patching and the features. So we won't go through that again. And then lastly on that list is the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, which gives you these additional tools like MBAM that we talked about earlier, and the Diagnostic and Recovery Toolkit. Advanced Group Policy Management is a tool which essentially gives you sort of like a check-in, check-out type mechanism. It's a historical sort of view of your group policies. When a group policy changes, it's quite easy to sort of lose sight of what the settings were previously. So that's what Advanced Group Policy Management would give you, that ability to keep a track of what the settings were in a more controlled environment. Okay.
Thank you very much for that run through, Chris. So I think that kind of brings us to the kind of end of the webcast in terms of what we wanted to talk about initially. Obviously, some of this we've gone through in some detail, some in high level detail. Obviously, if you've got some questions, which we'll go through in a second, but if you've got other kind of questions that you'd like to ask, if you'd like to pop them into the IM chat window, if we can, we'll try and answer as many as we can on the call, on the webcast, today, and then what we can do is then set up a call with you individually to go through some of those questions in a lot more detail if maybe we can't cover it all today. So just going through some then, Chris. So one from Gavin we've got is, so this is going back to Windows Hello, I think, and some of that.
I can't actually see that question.
That's fine. I'll ask, and then so we've got the Windows Hello feature. So it's would this be dependent on the grade of the camera to use the Windows Hello feature? Obviously if you're doing the facial recognition element of it.
Yes, definitely. It's a really good feature if you wanted to use that facial recognition, but unfortunately you do need quite a new device that supports the infrared camera technology, because the standard cameras just give you a flat image, and the facial recognition needs to provide more of a sort of a 3D image. So you do need a particular camera.
Yep. So although with the Windows Hello though there are other mechanisms, it doesn't have to just be facial recognition.
No, absolutely.
Fingerprint recognition as well.
Yeah, you can do the fingerprint as well. But the Windows Hello just gives you that extra level of security for multi-factor authentication.
Yep. And then the next question from Max again was, what's the difference between Windows Hello and Windows Hello for Business? And I don't think there is necessarily a difference, although it's the feature set, I think, behind it. So obviously Windows Hello, if you like, is more for the home user, if you like. So it allows you to sign into your sort of home PC and allowing you access to that. Windows Hello for Business obviously takes that to the next level. So there are group policies that you can define around it. It's obviously for signing in, into more corporately owned devices. You can also do your VPN aspect as well, can't it? It creates certificate services in the background to enable secure communication back into your corporate environment as well. So essentially, in terms of what it is, the Windows Hello feature, there is only the feature. Sorry, the function, the feature itself of Windows 10 is the same. It's just that when you turn it on in a business environment, you get much more capabilities, much more feature-rich elements behind it.
It gives you that greater degree of control for items that are applicable in a corporate environment.
Yeah. Cool. So hopefully that answers that one for you. How does device attestation? I can't say that.
Attestation.
Attestation. Thank you. Lend itself to bring your own devices?
That's a good question actually, because the information is being logged at boot and then passed on to a service, and that wouldn't happen till you're inside Windows anyway. And I guess if you've got conditional access and you've got an internet connection, then that information will be passed on. So it's how it lends itself is it's another way of providing access to Office 365 or OneDrive or SharePoint. So it lends itself well to bring your own device.
In a way of locking it down, potentially, I suppose what we're saying is allowing approved to bring your own devices into the environment. Yeah,
because what would happen is if, as I said earlier, if that device had booted from its native disk and it hadn't been, detection wasn't made that it had been booted from a USB stick, or it had been booted, had the boot sector modified by a virus or anything, then that information would be passed on, and that would be the basis of the compliance. So it would either be compliant or not based on that logged information.
Yeah. Cool, thank you. Next one, can WIP be used in conjunction with third-party, i.e. non-Microsoft applications for data loss prevention? So WIP, I'm assuming, is going back to the Windows Information Protection.
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but given that it's about detecting the type of data, and it obviously works in conjunction with Office 365. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that, to be honest.
That's fine. I'd say what we'll do there, Mark, is gather that information for you and come back to you directly on that, and if that one's okay. Max asked a question about SCCM upgrade for 2016, so hopefully we covered sort of elements of that in that kind of final slide in terms of the preparation.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to sort of touch on that slightly, it says here, can SCCM previous version be used to deploy Windows 10? The answer is yes, but really, if you are going to deploy Windows 10, you should be aiming for, for newer version, unless you have a particular reason not to. But you do need the right components, so the right version of SCCM, the right version of the ADK that are applicable to the version of Windows 10 that you want to deploy. Sorry. So yeah, it is possible, but ideally you should be looking to sort of get upgraded. But one of the most important things about upgrading Config Manager and the operating system that it sits on, that I mentioned earlier, is to do with the driver signing of Windows 10. So that's quite an important point on getting your operating system and Config Manager up to date. Otherwise, it just doesn't recognise the drivers when it imports them for your driver packs.
And they should go, because there is, obviously, when they've released Windows 10, there's the recent anniversary update that's come out, which was it 1508, and then the 1602, that's the kind of current...
the anniversary update, yeah. Yeah.
So they're obviously releasing these iterations. We need to obviously make sure that the system center is at the right level to be able to do that. And there's obviously, we can help with that and advising you on what they need to be, but there's obviously advice and guidance out there as well from the Microsoft articles. Okay, cool. Next one was, we have looked at Intune previously and found that some of the features are limited without implementing Active Directory Federation services. Is the management of devices easier with Windows 10 and Intune? Define easier.
I can't actually talk about ADFS because it's not my area of expertise. Yep. But is it easier managing Windows? Is it easier to manage Windows 10 and Intune? So I would imagine sort of similar rules apply because you do need that Active Directory or Azure sort of Active Directory configuration in order to have that synchronization between your on-site domain and your cloud service. So obviously, these over time as these products get developed, Microsoft typically do make things sometimes more complicated, but essentially what they're trying to do is to make things easier. So with the things that we've talked about, like the credential guard and the device guard and health attestation, I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier, but it's giving you that higher level of control, which is also, it's pointing towards security. So I don't think the answer is yes, it makes it easier, but I think it gives you a greater degree of control.
Yeah, and it's a greater degree of flexibility, I think, to actually get to the lockdown or environments that you need. I think for me that's the kind of key to that. It's a lot more feature rich. And then the final question at the moment that we have is, what kind of hardware is generally used as a refresh path for Windows 10 laptops, tablets, and or hybrids?
Yeah, so Microsoft do say that if your hardware is capable of running Windows 7, it should be capable of running Windows 10.
Yeah.
So, although maybe some businesses may well choose to go down that path, and many do, you probably find that the last time you deployed a piece of hardware, if it was for Windows 7, it's many years ago. Could be up to 10 years ago. So a lot of businesses are sort of taking that opportunity to upgrade hardware anyway. But I think the point Stitz is, if your hardware is capable of running Windows 7, you should be okay for Windows 10. But obviously, you need to bear in mind as well that to take advantage of a lot of the features and security aspects of Windows 10, the hardware does need to be updated as well. For instance, if you want to use BitLocker, you need to have a TPM chip, and going back to Windows 7, some devices probably didn't have that by default. And then going back to the question that someone has said earlier about the camera, you certainly wouldn't have had that technology back in the day of Windows 7, and also UEFI and BIOS. That's something which you have to have for some of these Windows 10 features. So there's a lot of good reasons to upgrade the hardware. But if you can't, you can still run Windows 10, but you may well not get the full benefit of all the features and security aspects that Windows 10 can offer.
I think for me, it's giving the end users, and I know this will send shudders through some of you on the call, but it's about giving your end users the choice as to what kind of device they want to use. And when they choose what device it is, so whether that's a mobile phone, whether that's a tablet, whether that's a hybrid, whether that's a laptop or a desktop, wherever they go, whatever they log into, the look and feel is going to be and should be the same, because it's going to be Windows 10. So you log into a desktop because you're in the office, you use Windows 10. You maybe have to then go out to a customer site and you use your phone to then run that meeting, using things like Continuum and being able to present your slides from your phone onto a screen, for example. All of that, it should all be Windows 10, and therefore it looks and feels exactly the same. So I suppose, to me, it's about giving the choice to the end users and allowing them how they want, the choice of how they can consume the devices.
Yeah, absolutely. Going on to that point of Continuum, that's again, it's a function that is only supported on some of those newer phones as well. So the hardware it does come into it's quite important. Yeah.
So I'm just cautious that we're kind of coming to the end. It's kind of we gave ourselves an hour, so it's due to the webcast is due to finish at 11 o'clock. So what we'll do, Mark, is if it's okay with you, your final question there, if it's okay, we'll kind of cover that off. Obviously, you've asked a few questions into this webcast, so thank you for that. What we'll do is maybe set up a call and see if we can contact you directly and go through some of those questions and obviously your final question on there and come back to you directly on that, if that's okay. So, Abby, I think we're done.
Wonderful. So thank you all very much for your time. Mark will reach out to you directly, as Ian said, just to try and get a call set up with you. But thank you all very much for attending, and we can send you out a copy of the webcast after the call as well if needed. Thank you very much.
Okay, is everybody gone?
Yes.
Cool.